Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, and positive Knicks news as if we needed more of that on a 5-game win streak. Mitchell Robinson might not actually be done for the season, so we're going to talk about that in our first segment, then continue taking some mailbag questions from you guys. Can Quentin Grimes get his starting job back, or is that ship already sailed? And what has led to the Knicks having more assists in the OG Anunoby era so far? We're getting into that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode, because spoiler alert, we might again have more than 5 episodes for you guys this week. We've been really cooking lately. There's a lot to talk about. 5-game win streak, new player, all kinds of rumors. There's just not enough days in the week, so make sure you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrict.land. And he is Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and our favorite Knicks newsbreaker's favorite Knicks newsbreaker. I don't know. I don't know who the report that we have in here. We have a quote from an article. Gavin, is this from ESPN?
It's Adrian Wojnarowski. So
that's who I thought.
You want to jump the gun on your favorite there, because it's not Ian Begley, at least as far as I saw. Woj was.
Well, I was going to say Ian Begley had a video report on it afterwards too, sure. So I wasn't sure if you pulled the quote from there. But either way, I'll give the Woj quote here. He's my favorite national guy at this point, considering he's the one that seems most plugged into the Knicks. He says there's optimism New York Knicks center Mitchell Robinson could return late in the regular season from an ankle surgery, a significant part of the reason the NBA denied them a $7.8 million disabled player exception in his absence. Sources told ESPN Robinson had his best NBA season going, including a league-leading 5.3 offensive rebounds a game. Robinson has averaged 6.2 points and 10.3 rebounds in nearly 30 minutes a game for New York. He's in the second year of a 4-year, $60 million contract. So, Gavin, the big news here, obviously, the Knicks get denied that disabled player exception, which they applied for because that would have implied that Mitch is done for the year. I would assume that means that they have to send medical records to the league, and they look them over. I think they have like a panel of doctors that do this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then they said, no, he definitely could come back this year. So cool. That sort of jives more with what was initially reported, which was like an 8 to 10 week timetable.
Yeah. So Alex, real quick, in this article, they said the Knicks filing for the disabled player exception was defined as them doing their due diligence. And it makes a lot of sense, because in case Mitch was injured worse than they thought, or these doctors believed it, the Knicks would benefit from it. And if not, there's no downside.
Yeah, exactly. So good on the Knicks for doing that. Bad on them for making us think that Mitch might be out for the whole year. But either way, what's your big takeaway on this? Because it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, I think this potentially creates a really interesting scenario if Mitch comes back like March-ish, and gets a runway of a few weeks prior to the playoffs. Like, how do you handle that situation if you're the Knicks at this point with how good Hartenstein's been playing?
Yeah, so I had two-part thoughts. One, this was from you, just how it affects them at the trade deadline. You wrote this and I agreed with it. I don't think there's any reason for them to trade for a center now. I mean, just even on the chance Mitchell Robinson comes back and they can make do with Precious Achiuwa, who I think is inevitably going to start shooting a little better than he has and start playing a little bit better than he has as he continues to acclimate to New York in a system that is probably not as favorable to a skill set as Toronto's. And two, it might make them a little bit more inclined to go for like a Malcolm Brogdon type guard, because again, like I think if I'm Tom Thibodeau, I was extremely concerned about the backup 5 minutes in the playoffs, and just knowing like, all right, like let's just say the Knicks are in a 4-5 matchup in the first round or 3-6 matchup in the first round against the Sixers, and you're playing Joel Embiid, and there's a game where Hartenstein is in foul trouble, or let's just say he gets injured, like against the full strength version of Joel Embiid, that is the game. That is the series if Hartenstein was out for any meaningful amount of time, because you just have no one else who can even like somewhat contain someone like Embiid. If you have Mitchell Robinson back, obviously that is a very different story. My next thought was who becomes the Knicks starter with how well Hartenstein is playing and how well, I think more importantly, the Knicks are playing with Hartenstein at center. And Alex, I'll let you explore this further, but I am going to say, despite the fact that Mitchell Robinson was having a career year, probably an all first team or all second team defense type of year, I think you're probably going to have to stick with Isaiah Hartenstein as your starter, less so for the regular season, but because I personally believe he is better suited for most matchups, not all matchups, but most matchups the Knicks would see in the postseason.
Yeah, I think when you consider the fact that, like, let's just say if you're going to put it, and the numbers actually suggest that he's been closer to like almost a 1-to-1 with Mitch, but let's just assume that like Hartenstein would be, I don't know, 85% of what Mitch gives you on the offensive rebounding and like the defense and everything that Mitch brings to the table. The fact that he offers also the short roll passing, the just general more options on offense for this team, plus the fact that like if this starting lineup continues being like by far the best lineup in the NBA right now, I don't know how you can. I mean, you just there's only so far that honoring Mitch's starting spot from early in the season goes. And I don't think that the Knicks would then approach this and be like, whoa, you're never going to play now, Mitch. Sorry, you bum. Like, like Hartenstein's going to play 42 minutes a game in the playoffs and you'll be lucky to get like 6 now. I think that they would try to stagger it in such a way to keep both guys fresh and take advantage of what they both bring to the table. I think Mitch would still have plenty of opportunities to potentially close games. Like if he came in, at the end of the third and was going to play through midway through the fourth or something, and he's like really altering the game in the way that he can, especially how he did like in that Cavs series last year in the playoffs, then they'll probably be like, okay, well, you're going to close some games, whatever. Like Tibbs's whole thing is like, it's not who starts, it's who closes. You know what I mean? And it would just be a little bit of a throwback like to the early days of Mitch's career when he was backing up not nearly as good of players as Isaiah Hartenstein. But yeah, I don't know how you could possibly at this point be like, you've played great, and like you've played like one of the best starting centers in the league in Mitch's absence, and now you have to go back to the bench. I don't think it would work that way. And you have a pretty easy way of explaining it to Mitch and just being like, you're working your way back into shape. He played really well. Also, those two are apparently best friends, so like they should hopefully take it well. But I think you got to stick with Hartenstein.
Yeah, I think to me the biggest thing is that I noted on last night's show, but the Knicks are so far in the OG Anunoby era, not only the best defense in basketball, they're the best defense in basketball by 7.5 points per 100 possessions. And I don't expect that to keep up. They're going to start playing better offenses. They've benefited from a little bit of shooting luck in terms of how teams are hitting their open shots. And they played some truly terrible teams. So all that has influenced that stat. But the fact that they're 7.5 points better than everyone else in the NBA tells me that they likely have a top 5 defense on their hands with Isaiah Hartenstein in there, which to me, like, even if there are gains to be made with Mitchell Robinson, they're on the margins. And then the other thing is that the Knicks had a substantial issue scoring the ball in last season's playoffs. They were far and away, if I'm remembering correctly, like the worst offense, certainly out of the teams to make it to the second round. The only team that was comparable really was the Cleveland Cavaliers, who the Knicks were shutting down for that whole first round series. And maybe if the Knicks are playing the Cavs again in a 4-5 matchup, perhaps reverse this time, the Knicks have home court, you could justify going back to Mitchell Robinson just because he was so dominant against that team. And I think Jared Allen might wet his shorts if he just sees Mitch walking out for that opening tip again. But outside of that, I just think you need to squeeze every inch of spacing out of the starting lineup as humanly possible, given that you don't have that extra creation of an Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. Now, if the Knicks make a trade to get someone like DeJounte Murray in there, maybe you could talk me a little bit more into going back into Mitch, but I would still lean even further into offense because I think at the end of the day, that's what wins in the playoffs. And of course, Hartenstein is a drop-off, but not a substantial one defensively. That being said, Alex, like maybe we could finish on this. I would be super intrigued to see Mitch and OG on the floor together, what they could do defensively. And I was thinking this watching last night, what they could do from an offensive rebounding perspective with Julius Randle as well would be scary.
Yeah, I mean, that part would be amazing. The one thing, and like, I hate to say it, but like I've been a little bit like Isaiah Hartenstein pilled these last few weeks on this, but like the paint is definitely more open these days, just based off the fact that he even just has that floater out to around the free throw line, like to keep teams honest. Uh, it does worry me a little bit that one of OG's biggest skills has been cutting in from the 3-point line, from the corners, and being able to get in there for an easy dunk, for a quick pass to him there, or just fly in for the offensive rebound and then a dunk or something, like an unexpected offensive rebound. So like things aren't packed there like it would be with Mitch, where you'll have 4 guys trying to like hold him down with, with all their might. So there's a little bit of me that worries that it would actually harm OG on the offensive end, though defensively, I think it would be amazing. Although, again, it's really hard to argue against what Hartenstein has been able to do on that end, too, as far as influencing plays at the rim and just in general walling off that part of the court for the other team. I don't know. Again, I love Mitch to death. I always have. And he's been one of my favorite players on this team for years. And I still believe in him, certainly. And I still think he's an amazing player. But the Knicks have really been at a different level, I think, with Hartenstein out there, because he is giving you roughly the same things that Mitch is in Mitch's strongest areas, while also giving you a couple extra wrinkles otherwise. I think they're just going to have to go with what they got. But in spot minutes, especially if they desperately need a stop or desperately need a rebound, that like Randall, Mitch, and OG front court would be extremely imposing to have to look at from the other side, especially if it's a team that's a little on the smaller side. So,
real quick, one defensive possession: Deuce, Grimes, OG, Precious, Mitch is pretty fun.
That would be pretty fun too.
A lot of length, a lot of switchability. That would be cool. All right, go ahead, Alex. I interrupted you.
Oh, well, all I was going to do, Gavin, was just let everybody know that we're going to talk about Quentin Grimes in the next segment and whether he can work his way back into the starting lineup. We had a great mailbag question about that. But first, do you want to let everyone know about our friends over at PrizePicks?
I would love to. All right, so you might be at home asking, what is PrizePicks? Well, you should know at this point because it's the largest daily fantasy sports DFS platform in North America. That's our continent. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. So instead of battling those weirdos that have a statistics degree from MIT, yes, I am calling them weirdos because I'm envious of them, and put in thousands of entries. You're not going to beat those guys. They are freaks. You might not be a freak. You're going to lose those. You don't have to do that with PrizePicks. You just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. What's so cool about PrizePicks is they offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types, and that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. They also offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. They also have a reboot policy, so even if one of your players gets injured for football and basketball games, if you have a player exits the game in the first half, does not return the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com, says Locked On NBA, and use code Locked On NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, go to prizepicks.com, says Locked On NBA, and use code Locked On NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Alrighty, let's circle around to the mailbag. The first question comes from our guy John at John the Empire, epic handle. He said, barring another trade, is there a path for Grimes to return to the starting lineup, or has Donte DiVincenzo cemented himself as an ideal fit and Grimes with the second unit? Alex, I personally think there is definitely a path for Quentin Grimes to return to the starting lineup. I think that might actually end up being Tom Thibodeau's preference before the postseason starts. But what's your take on it?
I'd be intrigued to see if that's the case, because I feel like I'm starting to see it where Tibbs is almost looking at this through the IQ lens, where he's starting to sell himself on Grimes as the guy off the bench and DiVincenzo is the guy starting. I think the biggest hurdle for Grimes potentially getting back into the starting lineup is that it's not all on him. I think that he could play really well and continue shooting well, continue playing with the confidence we've been seeing lately, continue pouring in points off the bench. And yet, if Tibbs still feels that DiVincenzo is doing well enough in the starting lineup, he's going to fall back on the same stuff he always said with Quickly, which is, well, it doesn't matter who starts, it's who finishes. Second time I've pulled this out in this podcast, but like, that's just his mantra. and he has certain guys that he just grows to view as bench players rather than starters. And if that's how he starts viewing Grimes, then Grimes might not have much say in the matter through his play as to if he gets back there or not, unless DiVincenzo really takes, it falls off a bit, which has happened in the past. I mean, I know that Bucks fans are still really upset with Donte DiVincenzo for whatever reason. I've seen numerous times where they'll like come into, Knicks people like praising Donte this year on Twitter or whatever and be like, oh yeah, we'll just wait till he starts to suck at the end of the year. And especially towards playoffs and blah, blah, blah. Like wait till he goes cold. And it's like, all right. I mean, the Warriors people didn't seem to have any of those qualms last year. So maybe he's grown a bit since his first couple years in the league. But yeah, I maybe he falls off a bit. Maybe Grimes plays his way back in. As of right now, I would not be betting on it because also I think that Tibbs enjoys that when OG sits, he can have another primo defender come in off the bench. And I think that's appealing to him too. And then the fact that he can have both of them playing at a certain point later on in each half is also appealing to him. So I don't know. I'd be surprised, but I'm curious to hear your take on why you think it might be on the horizon.
Yeah, so I guess let me clarify this. I would not bank on it. I don't think I would say obviously nothing's imminent with how well this starting line is playing. You referenced it before. They are plus 20 per 100 possessions. They are, in terms of net rating, the Knicks third best lineup on the season. The first two are that Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickly, RIP, Josh Hart, Julius Randle foursome that was just incredibly dominant. But for now, like you can't even like bring up a change. Like I don't think it's reasonable. I think Donte's playing great. I think all the reasons we initially advocated for the change have kind of come to fruition. Like he's a little bit more confident in his role. Like he's greater off ball activity. And I think he's like, as a product of being in the league, like 2 more years than Grimes, like he's just a more refined player and more able to fit in with guys who dominate the basketball in Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. The reason I think it could potentially be on the horizon is Quentin Grimes is a substantially better perimeter defender. And that's not to say Donte's bad. Like he is overall really impressed me this year. He's at least as good of a defensive playmaker as Quentin Grimes is. I think my fear is in the playoffs, you are going up against bigger wings. And while Grimes is not substantially taller, he's maybe an inch taller than Donte DiVincenzo. He is stronger. He is more physical. We saw the job that he did on Jimmy Butler. And while Grimes' offense didn't by any means translate to the playoffs, he shot terribly last year. His defense very much translated. And I think that will stick in Tom Thibodeau's mind. And I don't think this would be a move to start a series. I think this would be something you pull out in the middle of the series if someone is really torching Donte. But I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Grimes ultimately started a handful of playoff games for the Knicks this year. And I think the allure of having a defender as good as Grimes taking the second best perimeter option with OG Anunoby in a starting lineup is pretty good. Or it was pretty appealing to Tom Thibodeau. Plus the idea that Donte's game, I know this is what you're just railing against, Alec, doesn't totally translate to the playoffs. And you can go over his career stats. He was decent during his first run on the Bucks. I think he was actually that was 1920. Was that their title year? Was that the bubble year? I'm not quite. That was the bubble year.
And 21 was the year that they won the title.
21 was the title year. So that was the year he got hurt and he didn't really do. He played 23 minutes in those 3 games and only had 3 points per game, shot like horrifically bad. So if there are bad vibes from Bucks fans, that's where it's coming from. The bubble year, he actually shot pretty well. It was 45% from the field, 33% from 3, 7 points per game, or just under in 16.5 minutes. Couple of assists, couple of rebounds. That's not bad at all. And then the Warriors last year, like really, really struggled with his shooting. Still a small sample size, only 26 career games in the playoffs, but he's had some issues there. And that's not to say Grimes would be any better because, again, he hasn't shown it yet. But I just do think there's reason to believe that could be a possibility. And I guess the last thing I'll note, Alex, is just that, like, he's the Knicks' best young asset at this point. And I wonder if there's going to be some push at some point from the front office to market Grimes a little bit more to future teams. I think the Knicks are probably too good for that to be in the forefront of their minds, but just kind of something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about. And, that might be playing into why they're saying or possibly saying to Tibbs lately too, like, hey, make sure you get this kid like a few more minutes. Like he's playing well. Like let's not cap his amount of minutes he can play here, especially in games we're winning, like leave him out there a little longer. Or it might be a conscious decision by Tibbs because I mean, Tibbs has always been a Grimes guy. Obviously last year he moved Grimes into the starting lineup and it was the tipping point for the Knicks turning into a much better team for the whole rest of the year. So I think he definitely loves Grimes. I guess my only thing is like, and this would be more my philosophy. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
necessarily Tibbs's, but I like the idea of starting him in the playoffs too. For one of the things you mentioned, like you're going to be going up against teams, especially if you make it to the second round again, you're going to be going up against teams that have multiple first option level players.
Mhm.
Like you might be up against the Celtics, who would have Tatum and Brown to throw at you. And if you have OG out there guarding Tatum, it would be really great to have Grimes out there on Brown, forcing him to dribble left the entire time. I mean, just there's a lot of possibilities there to where you can make a really good team really uncomfortable right away if you had both those guys out there at once. So I hope that it's on the horizon. And I don't know if it's gonna result in Grimes starting, but I wouldn't hate the idea. If he's able to continue putting together good stretches of play through the end of the year, then hopefully it's at least on the table if the Knicks find that they need that better one-on-one defender in the starting lineup once playoff time hits.
Yeah, I'm with you, Alex. You want to tell us about our good friends over at Jase Medical? And then next on Locked on Knicks, we're going to talk about why the passing has been so good. Knicks assist numbers are way up, why the ball is popping around since they've gotten OG Anunoby. But first, we're going to talk some Jase Medical.
Yes, and Jace Medical is an interesting company. I'll say this much. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's just talk for a minute about preparing for real life. Get a little serious here. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. And I'm going to be honest, man. I can't imagine. I might get Gavin a Jace kit here because we got to be
Wow.
healthy throughout the throughout the rest of this season going into the playoffs. The Knicks are gonna be real good, and I need my running mate here, and I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than not having Gavin on a podcast if the Knicks win a big playoff game or something, and we really need both of us here. So especially, but on a more serious note, if I had a family member that needed a life-saving medication that they might not be able to get, it would be great to have that on hand in case something bad happens. Like, for example, we just had this big storm the other day, lots of flooding, could potentially stop you from being able to get to the pharmacy and potentially get the medicine that you need if your prescription is up. But thankfully, everything should be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to get prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use code Locked On to get $20 off your order. All right, Gavin, we're back in. Continuing taking some mailbag questions that we solicited earlier this week. We might still have a few more. And honestly, if you got questions for us and you're in the YouTube comments right now, feel free to drop them in there. We'll do our best to answer them because we want to talk about what you guys want to hear about. So, we love hearing from you guys to hear what you want. Or go on Twitter at Locked On Knicks. Feel free to just send it right to us that way. Doesn't matter. But this question comes from Twitter, comes from Adrian Chatham at MagicAge683 on Twitter. And Adrian wants to know, what do you guys think is contributing most to the team assist totals going up? Why do you think everyone's become more willing passers? Do you believe it's iHeart's involvement with the offense? Is it the Nova connection helping better with less mouths to feed? Your thoughts, Gavin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. I think honestly, the two biggest things are not having RJ Barrett in the starting lineup. And as I've noted before, I hate to crap on RJ because I love the guy. 37-point game the other night, Alex. He's been cooking for his hometown Toronto Raptors, and we love to see it. But he was a little bit of a black hole at times, and instead you have OG Anunoby, who is a very willing ball mover. And I think even more than that, just doesn't soak up all that many possessions. And that is becoming a common theme. And you're having these possessions that either end in an isolation bucket for Julius Randle or Jalen Brunson, or they end in really clean creation. What I mean by that is sometimes like RJ would drive and it wouldn't really go anywhere. And you get to a situation where it's like the end of a shot clock, or he doesn't make a great pass. And that means the ability to make the next pass and make the next pass after that is impacted. And those are of lower quality. So in getting a micro advantage and turning into like maybe like a mini advantage, I guess that's bigger than micro, is not a great situation. But having Julius Randle or Jalen Brunson puncture a major hole in a defense and then getting to swing it after that, and generally to better shooters, because instead of RJ Barrett on the floor, who post a hot start was around a 30% three-point shooter, you have OG Anunoby, who's closer to a 40% three-point shooter on the tail end of those possessions. And you have Donte DiVincenzo playing more of these minutes than earlier in the season, who is a better finisher than Quentin Grimes. You also have Isaiah Hartenstein, who, unlike Mitchell Robinson, is a talented passer and, of course, is going to get some assists because a lot of his passes are to guys cutting to the rim directly. So to me, this is a pretty clear example of personnel shifting style and shifting effectiveness. And I also just think it's a product of good vibes. And I think when defense is good, it leads to a lot of sharing because it leads to transition opportunities, which inevitably result in assists. It leads to you wanting to reward someone who's made a good defensive play. Good energy, good passing, good scoring, Alex. I'm turning into a basketball hippie, but it's a lot of positive stuff that has taken the Knicks from a team that's still on the season, is only 28th in assists in the entire league. Over these last 5 games, they've been 17th. So that number should continue to creep up.
Yeah, and if you took their last 5 games and you put it in terms of where they would rank in the aggregate of the entire season, they would be 11th because they've averaged 26.4 per game in their last 5 games. That's efforts of 26, 27, 27, 29, and 23 assists in their last 5 games, which of course are all the games of the OG era. And yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I'll just try to add what I can to like additional things that I think are in play here. And you sort of alluded to this, but like with the RJ loss, I think that one of the big things too is that you just take all those possessions that RJ was soaking up as a creator and you're utilizing them differently now. So now we're seeing Brunson have more opportunities to handle the ball, more opportunities to distribute, rather than he pretty much was just, especially during the RJ time, like he was looking more to be score first. And they were sort of using RJ's possessions as like it was sort of like Brunson was mostly about scoring. RJ was about scoring and getting to the line. And then Randall was about scoring enough to draw a lot of defense and then being the initiator, sort of. And I think that was more what the defined roles were between those three. The only problem, of course, being that RJ was not always the most efficient with his possessions, whether it was as, trying to initiate for someone else or just trying to, score the basketball. So if you just take those possessions and spread them out between the 2 guys that are left now and Randall and Brunson, suddenly they're being used more efficiently, honestly. And again, it's not a knock on RJ. I'm glad that like Toronto's doing really well with him, honestly, as much I mean, don't do too well, do just well enough that my 2 guys do good. In RJ and Quickly. Other than that, keep it down over there. But it's good to see that they're doing well, but clearly this has just been a better fit for what the Knicks have cooking in the starting lineup. I'll also say I like your point about the transition. I think that's totally true too. It also really helps that some of the guys on the bench unit are starting to play better. Like Quentin Grimes is hitting more of his shots now. So that's going to lead to more assists because when Grimes is hitting threes, they're usually assisted. He's not a huge pull-up 3 guy. Josh Hart is getting out more in transition, getting all the way to the hoop more, is cutting a lot. That certainly helps things along. And then they're starting to find some really interesting combo. Oh, and Deuce too. Can't forget about Deuce. Like Deuce is playing really well and starting to hit shots as well, which is a huge development.
And
so,
him and iHeart have amazing chemistry too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like they have amazing chemistry. I also have really weirdly liked this really popped. I got to see the Portland game in person and it really popped to me in person for whatever reason, just how much the weird like bench plus OG lineup really works, despite on paper looking like that would be the lineup where you kind of get exposed for not having a creator available. But just the way that they're just cutting, passing, like is just really beautiful to watch. And that has led to some really pretty possessions too, and some nice finishes that way. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of guys that were struggling are no longer struggling. And then the dynamic of the starting lineup has changed in such a way that the possessions are being used as efficiently as possible between Brunson and Randall doing most of the damage as creators. And now we're just kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I forgot to mention on last night's show, but like I had in my notes, like it almost feels like the bench has had a few days to practice together, and like the ball movement just looked crisper and more intentional. And it's hard because again, like if you're not having Brunson or Randall with them, like the margins with which they create advantages are going to be on very thin margins. So the passing just has to be great. But the ball movement just felt a little bit more intentional. I think the spacing and those guys just figuring each other out. Like even last night, there was a play where Deuce caught a ball like 2 feet away from Julius Randle because he was just crowding him, had a shot block, got it back and made a shot. But in like 2 weeks, like he's going to say, all right, Julius, like I always think to late in that, in the COVID season, the 2021 year, I guess the post-COVID season, where Julius, like we would talk about this, Alex, but he would just throw these blind passes to Reggie Bullock in the corner. And it's because he knew exactly where he was going to be on the court every single time. It was totally predictable. I think as the year goes along, he could start to develop a little bit of that chemistry with OG, with Deuce. And I think this is something that's only going to get better and better and better as this team continues to fortify their chemistry and learning how to play with one another, which is sort of the same thing as chemistry. I will end with a very nice quote from Donte DiVincenzo. He says, this was to Stefan Bondi. There's an energy right now that we have, and it's contagious. Guys are celebrating each other. Guys are moving the ball. And I think to me, at least, that's a product of everyone all of a sudden playing the appropriate minutes. And I think when everyone's playing the appropriate minutes, no one's taking stupid shots and everyone wants what's good for the team, not for themselves. It's really fantastic to see.
And that's as good a note as any to end on, I think. So we will be back for you guys tomorrow with a game recap and possibly a bonus episode on Saturday. We're maybe hammering that out. So maybe a 6th episode this week. I won't spoil it just in case it doesn't come together for whatever reason. But I think we're going to have another episode for you guys. But until then, thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.